Welcome to Elevate. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. Like David said, my name is Jay Foulk. I am the pastor here at the San Marco Escondido campus, which means I get to work with your parents more often than I get to work with you guys, but it's way more fun to be here with you. In fact, I was a junior high pastor for 10 years, which is crazy. Which means like through that time, I probably saw about maybe like 2,000 or 3,000 different junior hires come through my ministry. And there is no age group that I love more than the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade ministry, because here's what I believe about you. I believe that you are the future of the church. And that God doesn't have just big plans for you down the road, but he has big plans for you now. And I have seen time and time again that when you give your life to Jesus Christ, when you trust him enough to do what he says, that he does amazing things through your life. And here's the deal. You're at a point. Being how many of you are, 11? Anybody younger than 11? 12? Any 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds? Any 18-year-old junior hires? You never know. I'm just saying, some of you, man, you got that little like dirty mustache going on, like you guys maybe skipped a couple grades. But here's the deal. As an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, hold on, don't lose me already in the first 30 seconds. Here's the deal. As an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, you still have the majority of your life ahead of you. And if you look around at the adults in the room, your staff, the volunteers, if you look at your parents, if you look at pretty much anybody older than you, if we could go back to where you were and know what we know now, there are so many things that we would do differently. And if I personally could go back to your age, if I could go back to being an 11-year-old, and maybe for the first time, just really, if I at 11 years old understood who Jesus Christ is and what he wanted for my life, I think about how different my life would be. And you guys are like, well, you're a pastor. How much, what are you talking about? But there are so many things that I did because I didn't truly understand or didn't truly know who Jesus is. And it's funny, like in a church group, we talk about Jesus all the time, don't we? And we're kind of like, oh, cool, it's this big Jesus guy. In fact, like my son, he's 5. Anybody in here volunteering in any of the children's ministry classes? Anybody know my son Shane? He runs around like he owns the place, tries to steal every candy bar anywhere. Like if there's snacks, he's going to find it. He's the kid right now who is walking around in the giant green, like neon green cast, because on the last day of school, just wait. How bad is this, right? The last day of school, the last 30 minutes of the last day of school, he and his best bud Bennett, and they're in preschool, all right? But they're on those, like, you guys remember those kind of like animals? No, it wasn't a tricycle. It was like those animals that have the giant spring on the bottom and you rock back and forth. But Shane is a maniac, and he is like, I'm going to go hardcore, and Bennett, you're going to go hardcore with me. So they get on this one person, like, Rocky thing, and they're just like, wah, right, going crazy, and the teacher's like, stop it, Shane, stop it. And he's like, what? And he just, like, flies off, backflip in the air, and he lands on his arm, and he snaps both bones straight through. And I get a call from the teachers. They're like, hey, Pastor Foulk, this is Susie at the school. We think Shane might have broke his arm. I'm like, oh man, you think he might have broke? Okay, so I go over there, and his arm is wrapped in a blanket, right? And I look at it, and it's just like I'm like, okay, like, I'm like kind of scared. Like, do I want to unwrap it or do I not? And I unwrap it, and his arm looks like a Z, just totally like. And I said, you don't think he broke his arm. He broke his arm, all right? But here's the deal. Like Shane, he's around the church all the time. And the other day, we were cleaning out our garage. And in my garage, I have my old box for when I was a youth pastor and when I was a junior high pastor. And in that box, there's a little Jesus action figure. Have you seen those? And Shane was like, Dad, is this Jesus? And I'm like, well, kind of. It's like a plastic toy, but it's supposed to be Jesus. He's like, can I have this? And I'm like, sure. It's been in a box. So he takes it out. He runs into his room, and I don't see him for about 30 minutes. And then all of a sudden, he just comes into the garage. He's like, poof, kicks open the door, and he's like, who needs some saving, right? Like, and he's just like, that's what Jesus does, right? Like, he saves. But the truth is, like, no 5-year-old can really like fully understand. And even like for all of us, we're going to spend the rest of our lives trying to get to know who Jesus is. Because here's the deal. You can't truly fully understand who you are unless you know who Jesus is. Because he created you. He designed you. And a lot of times we can know about people, but if we don't truly know them, we completely miss it. In fact, like there's a lot of times, have you ever really thought about how what you believe about something totally changes how you respond to it? You know what I'm talking about? Like what you think about something, what you believe true about something, totally changes how you interact with it. For example, you remember when you were a little kid and you used to be scared of certain things? What were some of the things you were scared of when you were a little kid? Yeah.
The dark.
The dark. How many of you at one time in your life were scared of the dark? You're liars. We all are. Some of you are like, I still am. I sleep with my nightlight. Yeah, cool, right? I still am sometimes too. I remember when I used to have to take, my job when I was in junior high was to take the trash out, like to the curb, but we didn't have the rolly trash cans back then. We just had like the ones you had to drag or like carry. And I remember I used to just like screaming, like, running out to the curb at night and then run back because I was scared of the dark. What else were you scared of? Yeah.
I wasn't just terrified of the dark, but I was also terrified of
Oh,
coyotes.
coyotes. I'm with you. Nope, I don't want to mess with no coyotes. I'm with you. Anybody else scared of coyotes? All right. What else? What else are you scared of? You got your hand up? Oh! Spiders. Anybody scared of spiders? Spiders are one of my greatest fears of all time. How much time do I have? Okay. Spiders are one of my greatest fears of all time. In fact, I passed that on. So spiders are one of my greatest fears of all time. I am with you. What's your name? Elijah. Man, like, I still get the chills about spiders, and I've passed that on to my sons because like the other day they were both like going into their room to change, and there was like the tiniest spider, and they were like, ah! Like screaming like bloody murder, and I was like, and I came in, and then I was like, ah! Like, you know, I called for my wife. I'm like, you gotta kill this, you know, like get the blowtorch, let's move, right? But I'm terrified of spiders. When I was in, I led a group when I was my first year in ministry. I led a group of high school students down to Belize. Anybody been to Belize? Belize is crazy. Don't go, all right? Like, they put us in the middle of the jungle. We were in the middle of the jungle. I'm not even kidding. We were driving in this van, and there, the what is it? The trees and the over whatever that's called above you, canopy. Yeah, that's it. All right, the canopy above us was so thick that in the middle of the day we would turn the lights off on the car, and you couldn't see anything, like pitch black, right? So then we get there, and there's like this. It opens up, and there's all this stuff. And I get out of the car, and it sounds like we're by a freeway, and I'm like, are there cars? Like, what is that noise? And they said, oh, that's just all the bugs. And I'm like. Right? Like, I know I'm here for the Lord's work, but I didn't sign up for this. So there are these crazy bugs all throughout Belize. In fact, like so many mosquitoes. There's a cockroach that's the size of a softball, and it's called the king cockroach, and it flies. Okay? All right? There's a bug called a botfly. Do you know what a botfly is? What a botfly does is it kidnaps mosquitoes, and it's like gets the mosquito in like a headlock, and then it starts planting like baby botflies on the mosquito's poker. So then when the mosquito bites you, it plants the botfly in your shoulder or in your arm, or one kid on our trip, his forehead. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I got a zit, or this is crazy. And then like 2 weeks later, all of a sudden this baby botfly is like, I'm a butterfly, right? Like out of your head, right? That's like all these, but this one night we're in Belize. And all the other, here's the other crazy thing, and I got a whole message to talk to, so this is why they never let me talk, because I have too many stories. But so they have these, we realize that all of the walkways and the cabins are on 2-foot stilts, right? So they're all raised off the ground about 2 feet. And I'm like, oh, this is cool, maybe because of floods. And I'm just walking through. And they say, time out, we need to talk to you about something. And I was like, yeah, what's up? So I'm here with all these kids. And I don't know whose parents let me as like a 21-year-old lead like 30 high school kids down to this country I'd never been to. But they did. And so we're down there, and they're like, listen, couple things you need to notice about our camp is, one, everything is elevated. I'm like, oh yeah, because the rain. And they're like, no. I'm like, well, why? And they said, because there is a snake that's really like common around here, and it's called the two-step snake. And I said, why is it called the two-step snake? And they're like, because if it bites you 2 steps, you're gone. I'm like, that's going to be a hard phone call home if someone falls off these, raised things. And I said, okay, so what's the plan for that? And they said, see that guy over there, Jorge? I'm like, what's up, Jorge? And he's just like, hey, he holds up a giant machete, and it's like, Jorge is our plan to kill all these snakes. I'm like, oh, great, that makes me feel really comfortable, right? The other thing they said is, hey, if you hear this bell, like, ding, 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 like, run into the jungle. And I'm like, where all the two-step snakes are? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, what? Why would I want to run out there? And they said, because we're either being attacked by animals or people. And I said, Why did my parents let me come on this trip, you know? And so then I'm like, but don't the animals live in the jungle? And they're like, just trust us. So this one night, I'll be real quick. This one night, I have a room of 4 sophomore guys in my cabin. And how the cabins are built is it's like half thatch, then it's screen, and then it's like a thatch roof, all right? And so, and like I said, there's so many bugs. There's all these crazy things like everywhere, and it's super hot. It's like 110 degrees. It's super humid. It's so like sweaty. You ever been on those like plastic mats and you're sweating so much and you move and the bed just sticks to you? You know what I'm talking about? So it's like that. So it's getting late at night. We're sitting there, and all of a sudden, lights are out. And remember, everything, the cabin is off 2 feet of the ground. Underneath our cabin, we just hear, right? And I'm just like, right? Like I'm not saying nothing. The junior high boys or the sophomore boys are just like, right? Like nervous tension. And then all of again, and so then I go to this kid, Scott, who's like the tiniest guy in our group. And I'm like, Scott, go look and see what that is, right? And Scott's like, I'm not doing it. You're our leader. My parents trust you, you know? So I get up and I have this mag light. You guys know like the big flashlights, you know? And so I have this mag light, and I'm going to try and look outside the cabin. And as I'm looking outside the cabin, here's the deal about the flashlights, right? When I'm shining the flashlight out the screen, what happens when you shine a flashlight on the screen? The screen lights up, right? But you can't see outside. And so, like, I hear this thing, ba 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 ba, and I go over, and I'm just like, Jesus, please, like, come back right now if I'm going to die. Like, you know, like, just save me, Lord. And I get right up to the screen, and I'm looking up there like this. And all of a sudden, right next to my face, I see this. And I remember, I'll never forget it. I stood back like this, and there was the biggest spider I've ever seen in my life. It was a wolf spider. It was like this thick. I screamed louder than I've ever like screamed before, to where like as I was screaming, I'm like, this is what it's gonna sound like when I die, you know? Like, so I scream so loud, I drop the flashlight hits the ground, it rolls over, it lights up all 4 of the kids in my cabin, and they're just like this, right, like terrified. I jump in my bed, we fell asleep like this, just like trying to like shine our flashlights on the whole time. I don't know whatever happened to that spider, but Scott never made it home, so no, just kidding. But spiders, right? But now it's like the things that you're scared of. Okay, where am I? I'm going to get back on this, all right? All right, spiders, though. All right, so, but now it's like I'm an adult. I'm still scared of spiders. That's not the best example. What else were you scared of? Myself. You're scared of yourself? I'm a little bit scared of you, too. Yeah. Snakes and stingrays. Did somebody get stung by a stingray recently? Jacob? Where's Jacob? Oh, he's not here? Okay. Okay, what else? Couple things. How about this? For time's sake, anybody scared of clowns? Or when you were little? Yeah, clowns are scary. Clowns were a top fear of mine when I was a kid. I'm not as scared of them now. All right. What about? How about this one? Hold on. I'm thinking. Okay. Shh. Let's see if you guys can hear what I'm thinking of. Sharks. Anybody else scared of sharks? Or what about one of my ultimate fears? One of my ultimate fears when I was a kid were needles. Anybody else scared of needles, like shots? In fact, one time when I was like, I think 10, I had a dream about a clown riding a shark, holding a giant needle. It was horrible, all right? But I'm not as scared of those things now because, like with spiders even, like I'm still like, hold on, going back to my original point from like an hour ago. Like what we believe about something totally determines how we interact with it or how we respond to it. And so like now with spiders, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still a little bit scared of them, but I just like, you know, I don't panic. I don't scream like my sons. You know, the dark, for those of you who are scared of the dark, some of you are still scared, but most of us are like, oh, we're not scared of the dark anymore. In fact, like I used to be scared of the dark, but now I can't sleep if there's even like the little bit of light in my room, which is just crazy, right? But it's all because what did I think about the dark when I was a kid? I thought that's where the boogeyman lived. I thought that's where monsters were. But now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, I don't believe in those things anymore. And so what I believe about the dark has changed, and so how I interact with the dark has changed as well. And here's the deal. And you're like, where are you going with all these like stupid stories? It's this. That I don't think there's anything that is more, maybe there are more misconceptions about. Or things that there's nothing more that people miss it on than who Jesus is. In fact, Jesus is somebody that, like, so many people, especially in the United States, you say, hey, do you know who Jesus is? And people say, yeah, I know Jesus as whatever. Some of us follow Jesus. Some of us say, well, Jesus is the Son of God, that he came, he lived a perfect life, he died for us on a cross, even though he did nothing wrong, so that we could be in heaven with him one day. Some of us are like, okay, Jesus is a good teacher, or he's a healer, or he's a prophet, or it's just a fictional story, or he's just a normal person. Like, there's all these different things that people I talk to every single week believe about Jesus, but the truth is there is only one thing that Jesus is. And if you can understand that, it will truly change the direction and the trajectory of your life from here on out, from an 11, 12, and 13-year-old. In fact, I get to, like I said, work with a lot of the adults in the church, and every single week I have people sit in my office. 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 35-year-olds, 45-year-olds, 75-year-olds sit in my office, and they're living this life where they're proclaiming that they say, I believe in Jesus, but their life looks nothing like it. Do you get what I just said there? They're saying, I believe in Jesus, but the truth is they're saying they know Jesus. I know Jesus, but they don't truly believe in Jesus because they're not responding to it in the proper way. And I think the problem is because so many of us talk about Jesus, but we never spend the time or take the time to truly, like, wrestle through questions with people who maybe know a little bit more than us. We never take the time to really get to know him. And you're like, well, how do you get to know somebody who is not like, I mean, I don't see him. I can't, like, sit next to him. I can't throw a dodgeball at him. How do I get to know him? But you can. You see, every single week you come to Elevate on Tuesday nights or on the weekends, and you get to talk about Jesus, you get to learn about him, and you get to see how he's working in each other's lives. You get to learn what it means to pray, which prayer in junior high is super hard because you're just like, I wish I could just text God, which maybe start with that. Like, don't text an actual number, because if you're like, hey, God, and some random person's like, what? But just write down your prayers as if you were like, hey, had a hard day at school today, or I got this test coming up, or I'm worried about my parents, or worried about my brother, or I'm like, this person is being mean to me, whatever that might be. Just start talking to him like you would any of your friends. Or with scripture, reading the Bible. I remember when reading the Bible was so hard for me. I just open it up and I'm like I could read all 7 Harry Potter books in one night, but then I try to get through the book of John and I'm just like, right? Because it's what do I believe about Jesus? And here's the thing. I was thinking through some of the misconceptions we have about Jesus, because tonight, in the next 10 minutes, we're going to talk through this passage where Jesus, with his closest friends, he gets in front of them and he says, hey, who do people say that I am? And I believe that is the most important question that we can answer. And as we get to that, I was thinking through, if I were to ask your friends, or you were to ask my friends, especially the ones who don't go to church, who would they say that Jesus is? What would they say? And so I started talking to a couple of my buddies. I'm like, hey, what do you think, buddies who don't go to church? I said, who do you think Jesus is? What is he like? And I started they said, let me just tell you through pictures. And so here's the first picture what a lot of us think that Jesus is like. Right? How many of you have seen this before? Jesus holding the baby lamb. And this is just sweet, cuddly Jesus, right? When I see this picture of Jesus, I just imagine that, for whatever reason, baby lambs love Jesus, and they always followed him. He'd just be walking down the street, and a baby lamb would be like, Jesus, jump in his arms, and he's holding him, right? And this is sweet, cuddly Jesus, who is just harmless and will never say anything harsh, and just just this right? And honestly, this picture was on the wall in the 150-year-old Baptist church that I grew up in. And so when I see this picture, I would just think of Jesus as boring Jesus. You ever felt that way? Be honest. Anybody ever felt man, this whole Christian stuff can be kind of boring sometimes. There's so many rules. And then there's this boring Jesus, this cuddly Jesus. And then there's this Jesus, right? A little bit different, right? Jesus holding a baby dinosaur. And it's just kind of oh, Jesus is jokester Jesus, I don't take him that serious, he's just kind of funny. It's oh, whatever. We kind of make a joke about Jesus. Even with our friends, we can say even how most of us would say you ever say, and even I've done this where you're you use the Lord's name in vain because you just don't take it very serious, right? And it's just this joke to you and your friends, and almost where you treat Jesus like this. Buddy Jesus, hey, what's up, dude, right? Jesus is someone that he's one of your buds when you need him. He's just this happy-go-lucky guy. He's just happy to be in the circle. The friend that just is just happy to be there and is always fun, always laughing. And almost Jesus is your homeboy, right? You guys ever seen those pictures or the stickers around? And it's like we treat this God, and let's remember as we're looking through these pictures that somebody made these. All right? I didn't make these. I'm not good at Photoshop. I didn't do this. Somebody made these, and this whole idea like, Jesus is my homeboy. And when I was in high school, at this store, Hot Topic, that was like, there was shirts and hats and stickers and everything that they'd have all the time on it. And I always remember thinking like, man, I don't think Jesus is anybody's homeboy. Like, that's not what he's about. Like, he died on a cross for you. Like he, from before time was, like he was, you know? He's the same God who spoke everything into creation. And we just treat it so lightly. Or there's times where we look at Jesus like this, right? Like angry Jesus. You ever felt, and this is honestly, I think this is the one that I talk to most of the people that I counsel with, is this is how they think that Jesus looks at them all the time. Like, I know what you did. Oh, you remember when? And almost like we feel like Jesus is just waiting on a moment to give up on us. Like anytime like we do something wrong, that there's never going to be a chance where we can be good enough for Jesus to love us. And so many people, they would say, like, in fact, most of the people who don't like have any interest in Christianity is because they think this is what Jesus is. He's just this angry God who gives you all these rules. He tries to steal your fun all the time, and that you're never going to be good enough to live up to the plans that he has for you. But that's a lie. Or what about this one? Superhero Jesus, right? Like, he's just going to come in and save the day when you need him. Like, be honest. How many of you have ever said this prayer before? Be honest. I want to show of hands, because I've said this to Dallas. You can say this too. Dear Jesus, please, 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 please. If you get me out of this one, I promise I will never do it again. Right? Anybody in here ever said that prayer? Or Jesus, I didn't study for my test at all, but if you could just give me an automatic A, like I promise, I'll promise I'll study next time, right? Anybody? And we treat Jesus like this genie Jesus, or this Superman Jesus, who whenever we need him, he's just going to fly in and do what we need him to do. And then when he doesn't, we're like, what the heck, Jesus? Even though he's just been sitting in the back burner as Clark Kent your whole life. Well, what about this one? Build-A-Bear. Anybody ever do a Build-A-Bear when they're growing up? Their parents give them one? Tell me real quick, one person, raise your hand, and you got 15 seconds. How does Build-A-Bear work? Yeah, right here. You pick a bear. Any bear? Like color, like what? Like anything you want? Any bear. You give a heart, you give it a name, you make it. Can you dress it? Could you put like, if you're a Padre fan, you could put a Padre hat on it. What if you're a Padre fan and a Laker fan? Could you put a Padre hat and a Laker jersey on it? So pretty much you can pick and choose whatever you want that bear to be, right? I would tell you this right now. Hold on, and focus in on me real quick. I'm going to be real quick on the rest of my message. This is how most people treat Jesus. Where they're going to take the things that they want, and they're going to put it into this Jesus Build-A-Bear. Like, God, I love how you say we're supposed to love others. I'm going to do that. God, I don't like when it says not to gossip, because I like talking to my friends about everything. Or God, I know that you say, hey, this is how I should honor my boyfriend or my girlfriend, but I'm not gonna throw that out. I'm gonna let me be in control of that part of my life. Or God, I know that you say, this about what I watch or what I listen to or how I treat people, but really I think it's not important to me, so I'm just gonna do what I want. And here's the deal: we treat Jesus like this Build-A-Bear, where we pick and choose on who we want him to be. But here's what I told you earlier: is he is the living God. You do not get to define who Jesus is. He already is. But you can get to know him. So if you have your Bibles, open up to Matthew 16. All right, it says this, picking up in verse 13. It's on the screen behind me if you didn't bring your Bible. I would always just encourage you, in fact, you might notice that a lot of times if you ever sit in and watch Larry, Chris teach, we never put the scripture up on the screen, because we always want you to be able to know how to find it on your own in your Bible. And even if now it's cool, if that's on your phone or you just type it in, that's awesome too, all right? But look for yourself, because you never know. You need to be able to read it for yourself so you know that what I'm saying is true. Because I'm not always going to be here. TJ's not going to always be here. So it says this in 13. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? And you're like, well, who's the Son of Man? What does that mean? The Son of Man is how Jesus most commonly referred to himself in the New Testament. It was like his favorite title for himself. And you're like, so is he a Son of Man or is he the Son of God? He's both. He was fully human and he was fully God. And actually in the book of Daniel, there's this passage, you don't need to turn there, but this is how we realize that this title, the Son of Man, was actually like Jesus saying, hey, I am the Son of God. It said this in the book of Daniel. It says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and he was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. And his kingdom is one that shall never be destroyed. In other words, this guy is the man. If you don't know what dominion is, it's like his reign, his control. He's the ultimate king. So when Jesus says, who do people say that the Son of Man is? He's asking them, who do people think that I am? Do they think that I'm the Son of God? And here's what Peter responded. This is what the disciples responded. And the disciples, if you're new to church, the disciples were just the 12 guys who followed Jesus, who learned underneath him. They were like his students and his closest friends. They replied, some say John the Baptist. Who knows who John the Baptist is? Who's John the Baptist? His cousin, yeah. And he came to prepare the way for Jesus, right? And what happened to him? Right? Not happy. Okay? Others say you're Elijah. Who knows who Elijah is? Other than this Elijah, not this guy, different Elijah. Yeah. A prophet, right? And he did all these amazing things. He's one of the greatest prophets in the Old Testament. And then he says, but others still say that you might be Jeremiah. And Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet, but he was the one who came to Israel and said, unless you get this right, you're going to be punished. And it's going to be wrong. It's not going to be good for you. And they said, or maybe one of the other prophets. And then here's the question. It's the same question that was true to the disciples is true to you right now. And this is what Jesus said to them. He said, but what about you? And every eye up here right now, look at me. What about you? Who do you say that Jesus is? Because I know for most of my life, especially when I was your age, I was just riding on my parents' coattails. Or I went to a Christian school, so I decided I got a Christian school. I'm just riding on everybody else's coattails. But no one really ever asked me, who do you say that he is? So he said, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? And then Simon Peter answered, he said, you are the Messiah. You're the Savior. You're the Son of the living God. And then Jesus replied, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And listen to this. This is so crazy and so cool. He says, and the gates of Hades. Do you know what Hades is? Who just said hell? We're at church. Come on, all right? No, but you're right, okay? So the gates of hell will not overcome it. He said, I'll give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And then he ordered his other disciples, but don't tell anyone that I'm the Messiah. And then it says that Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, and he must suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. Pretty much every spiritual leader, every pastor of that day, anybody who was kind of like, your small group leaders or whatever. He said, I'm going to be tortured by them. I'm going to be handed over to them. And he said, and I must be killed. Think about it. This is Jesus telling his best friends, and then I got to be killed. And then he says, then on the third day, be raised to life. And then Peter, remember who Peter was? What did Jesus say he was going to build on Peter? You're the rock that I'm going to build my... And what is he going to have the keys to? Heaven. And even what won't be able to overcome him? Hell. Okay? So that same Peter, just a few seconds later, says this. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said. This shall never happen to you. And then Jesus turned and he said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Can you, what a whiplash where Peter's on the high and then he's like, oh, and get behind me, Satan. And he's like, oh my goodness. He says, you are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. And then listen to this. And this is what I feel like in the next 5 minutes. I don't want you to miss any of this. He says to them, with his closest friends at Caesarea Philippi, he said, whoever wants to be my disciple, whoever wants to be my follower, they have to deny themselves and they need to take up their cross and then follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. And what good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? You see, for the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with the angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they've done. So I've taught that passage 1,000 times, like at camps. In fact, I think the series is called Camp Talks. But it wasn't until this last January where I got to go with my wife to Israel. And I actually got to go to Caesarea Philippi that I understood what Jesus was doing. You see, I actually have a picture of Caesarea Philippi. Can we throw that up? So Caesarea Philippi was this city that they built by the side of this cliff. And they built it there. There was water. It was really easy to protect. So much so that it became like this just great, great place in the world's eyes. You see, it was a place where you could go and get anything that you want. Think about it like, this might be like a little bit beyond you. Hopefully you don't know too much about it. But it was kind of like the Vegas of that day. Where pretty much like anything that was of the world, you could get there. In fact, it was so just, I don't know how to say it any better than just like this sinful, dark place. That you see this dark place right here? That's called Pan's Grotto. And see, they at this Caesarea Philippi, they worshiped the god of Pan, who is the god of life, the god of fertility. They would, they would do all these just crazy, like, pretty horrible things. And, the worst of was that they would take little babies or kids and they would kill them, and they would not kill them, they would just throw them into Pan's Grotto because there's this water that comes out underneath all this and then comes through, and they would sacrifice them to the god of Pan. Because they thought, like, if Pan received them, then he would bless everybody. So they would sacrifice these other individuals so they could get all this worldly gain. And when I realized that, when I heard that for the first time, it like blew my mind, because what Jesus is saying, hey, what good is it for anyone to, like, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world? And in fact, he took his disciple, his closest friends, and he says, look around. You can have all of this if you want, or you can have me, but you can't have both. And that's why he said, like, perhaps I think the verse is one of the most challenging verses to me, but also one of the verses that I try to like wake up just holding on to, in verse 24, where he says, whoever wants to be my disciple then must deny themselves. Everybody say, deny themselves. Then he says, take up their cross. Say, take up my cross. And then follow me. Say, follow me. 3 things. The first one, deny yourself. You can stop repeating. But in other words, what he's saying is like, your life is no longer yours. If you want to be with me, you got to deny yourself, which means the things that you want, it should not be longer about what you want, it should be what God wants. And here's the truth. God has good things for you. He wants good things for you. When he gives you things to say, don't do this or do this, it's because they're going to help you in the long run. They're going to be the best thing for you. The second thing is he says, take up your cross daily. You know what's crazy about that? When you think of that, what do you think about? Jesus on the cross, right? Was Jesus on the cross at this point? This was before Jesus was crucified. So why would Jesus say, like, hey, take up your cross daily? Because the cross was like the number one just symbol of death in that time. And so what Jesus is saying is you need to die to yourself daily. Meaning every day when you get up, you're denying yourself. It's not about me. Every day when you get up, you're saying, my life is no longer mine, Jesus, but it's yours. And then he says, follow me. Which in other words is do what I say. Trust me enough to do what I say. Love me enough to do what I say. Follow me. Walk with me. Do life with me. Do life as I do it. I talked about like, man, if we truly know something or what we know about it, what we believe about it, it changes how we respond to it. Well, the question I would leave you is with this is, who do you say Jesus is and what do you really believe about him? Because those 3 things, Jesus wasn't just saying that to those disciples at the time. He's saying that to each of us, that any one of us who wants to follow him, we need to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and then just obey him. So who do you think Jesus is? Who do you believe he is? In your small groups in just a minute, you're going to go and talk to them. The band's going to come up. And as they come up, I'm just going to leave you with 3 things that I believe Jesus is. I believe that he's good. And I believe that he's God. So I believe he's a good God and that he cares about you and that he loves you and that the plans he has for you are going to be there to prosper you. When I was your age, that idea of God loving me just felt like he kind of had to. Like, when your mom says, I love you. It's like, you look great, honey. You're like, Mom, you have to say that, right? That's kind of like God loving us. But I hope you know that he likes you. Ephesians 2 says that you are God's masterpiece. In other words, you're the highlight of his creation. It talks about in the Psalms that he knit us together in our mom's womb. In Proverbs, it talks about he has these great plans for us. Like, that's the God that I believe in. The second thing I would say is this, that he has, is that he's not far from you. That no matter where you're at, he is with you and he loves you, no matter what's going on with your friend group, your family, school, whatever. Like, he is a God who knows you completely, loves you completely, and understands where you're at. And then finally, the last thing I believe about Jesus is that he has great plans for us. That if you, as 11, 12, 13-year-olds, can really give your heart to him and follow him, that you can change the world. You can change your neighborhoods, your schools, your families, because that's what happens. When we truly love God, the only logical response to it is to be changed by him. Let me pray. Jesus, I thank you so much for being a God who is kind and compassionate and loving. I thank you that in a world that isn't, that you are. I thank you that for each of these young men and women, you have a perfect plan for them, that you have a hope and a desire for them, God. I pray that they would be able to see themselves as you see them. I pray that you would just draw them close to your heart. The same prayer I pray for my boys, God, that you would just draw them so close to your heart, that you would help them understand that you are their king and their father and their friend, that you're not just this Build-A-Bear Jesus, this superhero Jesus, this angry Jesus, but you're God. So I think about when you stood up in front of Jerusalem and you stood in front of the city of the Israelites, or your chosen people, and you stood up there and you said, man, if you only knew what would give you peace. Lord, my prayer is that you would help these students, the men and women and young men and women in this room, would you help them realize what gives them peace, realizing that that is you. We love you in your name, amen.